Before I invite Jacob up here to offer spoken word pieces, just a couple of things that I wanted to make sure I covered as part of the anti-racism sermon series that I didn't quite get to. And this is all based on our anti-racist statement that we've released as a church. One is that the anti-racism team wants us as a congregation to think in a slightly different way than we may have in the past when it comes to community engagement. With community engagement, what is typical in churches, and is true for this church, is we like to write checks. We write checks to organizations that are doing really great work in the community, organizations that are working with communities that are the victims of systematic injustice. But for the most part, those are often handouts. Those are often charity situations. And we need to keep doing that, obviously. But the anti-racism team is also suggesting that we think of ways that we as individuals and as a congregation can get out into the community with our bodies. And one of the ways that they're lifting up to do that is that as individuals or as a church, we go to the festivals that happen in the area that are put on and sponsored by different racial ethnic groups and organizations. So the Juneteenth festival that's coming up this Saturday in East Palo Alto, the Cinco de Mayo festival that happened about a month ago, the Pacific Islander festival also happened in East Palo Alto last Saturday. Now, you might think, what is that going to do? Going to festivals, going to fairs, what's that all about? Well, remember what I talked about last Sunday is one of the most important ways that we can grow in our understanding of one another and as diverse people is just exposure. That we live in segregated groups, we live in segregated worlds and societies, so if we can intentionally cross those boundaries into other areas, we simply get exposure. When you're around a bunch of Pacific Islanders at a festival, you realize, hey, this is a really diverse community. There are all these different kinds of people, and in whatever box that I had people in is not big enough for this community. And the same for Cinco de Mayo, the same for Juneteenth. The more that we can do that, the better. So there's the exposure that we have. There's also the fact that we then are seen there, that we are seen as showing up to support this work in the community. And that brings us to the fact that not just showing up, but spending some money. So it's not a charity relationship, but it's a relationship in the marketplace where you're buying some food from the vendors at these festivals, that you're going to the different tables and supporting them. So when Leif Erikson stands up and invites us to go to a festival in East Palo Alto, it's not because he's lonely, okay? It's because he's out there doing this work all the time. He's going to East Palo Alto, he's going to these community festivals, and as part of the anti-racist work of the church, he's saying, hey, let's do this together. There should be more of us crossing this dividing line. So that's one piece. I want you to know that. And also in the third section of our statement, it talks about reparative work. And this is the statement, the part of the statement that we'll use in our liturgy later in the service. And people might wonder immediately, what does that mean? Are we going to be doing reparations? That's a buzzword. I talked about buzzwords last time. And the answer is we don't know exactly what it means, but we have to start asking the question. We have to start looking at our history as a church. What are the sources of our wealth as a church? How did this church come to be? And what sort of unjust situations was this church born? It may not be that this church specifically did terrible racist things. Maybe we did. But maybe we just sat on the sidelines while racist things happened in our community. So there's a part of just when you think about truth and reconciliation commissions, there's a part of truth telling. What is the truth about our history? And can we look at it objectively? And then you start to know, okay, so what can we do to repair that breach? You heard the phrase in our passage this morning, be repairers of the breach. There is a breach between racial groups in our society. There is a breach that, in general, white people have created. And we, as a congregation, need to figure out how we can start to build that back. You don't just fix it by pretending it wasn't there and saying, okay, now everything's fine. You look at specific work that we can do to fix it. And what does that look like? We don't know yet. And also in the statement, we say that it's somewhat aspirational because we don't even think we have the volunteer resources to do this work yet. So we are manifesting it. We are praying for it. We are saying, this is our vision. We are looking for people to come and be part of this, what we're doing, to do the research, to do the education, and then to figure out what we need to do to repair the breach. Third, not related to the anti-racist statement, last thing I'll say, just before I go on 2 weeks of vacation, this last week has made me want to lift up something to us as a congregation, and especially what's happened in LA, where there were protests, very isolated protests, by the way, in a very small part of the city, and the military got called in, the National Guard got called in, and what the narrative was in the media is National Guard is called in to respond to violent protests. And you see pictures of burning Waymos and, graffiti and whatnot. And I think it's so important for us as people of faith, as Christians, to interrogate the stories the media tells us. And it's critical that we who follow a man who was tortured and executed by state violence keep our eyes open to the reality of the state violence that's all around us. That the forest for the trees when it comes to violence is that we live in we live in a society that's just immersed in violence. That poverty is violence. That racial discrimination is violence. And that militarized police are violent. Even if they don't pull a trigger, just by their presence, by their guns they carry and the shields they carry, they escalate situations when they go to them. National Guard, of course, is violence. The military is the greatest death machine on the planet right now. We have the ability to kill people more than, maybe any time in history we can commit violence. So I just encourage all of us, and I know you all know this, but I need to say it. When you hear these media stories, there were violent protests. And they don't in the same breath mention all of the violence that is the context of whatever happened. That we don't lose sight of that context. That we understand that they are telling a story that leaves out the greatest amount of violence that's being done right now in our society. That doesn't tell that doesn't lift it up. And we can't forget. We can't look away from that violence because that's the violence we need to stop. We might not be able to stop somebody spray painting something or setting a car on fire in some isolated instance of anger. But we can work together to decrease the violence that we do on a whole as a society. And I think that's what our calling is as people of faith.